Do we go raise institutional? Do we go raise a bigger round? And the more we look at it and the more tech advances, we realize that certain grounds can be blazed a lot more effectively, a lot cheaper than before.
Hey, this is Jesse here, and you're about to hear episode 161 with Aishik from Rotobot AI, which provides personalized AI-driven insights for fantasy football players. Recorded in person during last month's Next.io summit in New York City, Aishik shares how ChatGPT inspired him to build Rotobot AI, how he used TikTok live streams to drive the first 10,000 app downloads, his thesis on how AI is lowering barriers for first-time founders, why he prefers smaller capital raises to a big VC check, and a whole lot more. Aishik is a very thoughtful entrepreneur and builder, and I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did.
The Betting Startups podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. 4 out of the top 5 US operators personalize player experiences with Optimove. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/bettingstartups. If you like what you see, you'll get your first month free.
All right, we're back and rolling on the Betting Startups pod. We are still in New York for the next New York City Summit, and sitting next to me right now, I got Aishik here. Aishik, how are you, man?
This is a big week, so I'm feeling good, super happy to be on this pod. If I were to take a guess, I'm probably in the top 5 to 1% of listeners here. So this is like literally my favorite podcast, and not saying that to kiss up, but want to do my best. There's going to be a lot of people that are rooting for me, that love me, that are watching this. And I also want to pay homage to people who have kind of been on here before, some awesome episodes. So I'm going to try to do my best.
Dude, well, happy to have you here. I appreciate you saying that. Just for the record, I did not pay you to say that, but thank you for saying that. So look, we're all gathered here in New York this week. As I say, where's home for you? Where'd you come in from?
Came from Massachusetts. Bussed in last night and yeah.
How long of a bus ride's that?
It was weird because it was during rush hour and it only took 4 hours. So we'll take that.
Nice, man. And how long are you in the city for this trip?
Till Friday.
Okay. Well, look, you and your team are building something called Rotobot AI. We'll talk about that in a few minutes here, but let's just start with a bit of an introduction, Aishik, for the benefit of the audience that might not yet know who you are. Can you just introduce yourself, give us a bit of a sense of your background and some of the major stops on the journey for you prior to starting Rotobot?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I've been an entrepreneur for most of my career, the majority of it. My first startup started when I was 19. I was still in college, and I've really been a big sports fan all my life. So just the opportunity to be working in sports, crafting products, and obviously getting to meet people in the industry and make connections it's really a dream come true. And to be here in the World Trade Center is I don't know if I'd be here by now, but it's been awesome so far. But yeah, a lot of my time spent has honestly been in the kind of 0 to 1 ball game, the 0 to 1 efforts. And this is my second stab at a startup. And honestly, we're really inspired by the general use case of AI. Once OpenAI came out and ChatGPT came out, it was, we thought it was a very big deal. We really felt like, generally our team consists of a lot of techno optimists, I would say. We're really bullish and we're really excited on just the future of tech and kind of like what that's going to bring to the industry. And we really felt like there was no shot that something like ChatGPT happens, sees all that massive adoption and just goes away, right? So typically when events like this happen, there's ecosystems that build around it. And, so we wanted to be there first and foremost. And, second of all, we noticed a very acute problem in sports where we felt like there's too much, information and not enough information personalized to the user. So basis of our products really starts with fantasy football and how we're able to use AI to give people insights to their questions. And what we saw was, on Discords and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok, people are just throwing out tons and tons of fantasy questions all over the place. And it's weird that action even exists, given the fact there's so much content out there in blogs and podcasts and articles. So even with all that stuff, people still aren't getting what they want. So we saw, a really, really good opportunity to leverage a new up and coming technology like AI, LLMs, to ultimately give people what they want.
So let's talk a bit about the product you guys have built. And I know it's early days in the journey, but as far as what you've got so far in market, talk a bit about what it is in terms of the solution you built for that problem and how it's all generally gone so far.
We started back in, I think it was March of 2023. That's kind of when the whole ChatGPT was launched as well. And, the initial scope was really just to create a chatbot for fantasy football. We saw all the people, asking questions all over the internet. We're like, all right, let's create a chatbot interface. So we took a majority of 2023 to go build that. And first was a web app. Like it was just, no app, just on your phone or the web and just the chatbot interface. And we definitely noticed lots of pros and cons here. Some people were getting, appropriate answers to their questions, and some answers lacked context. A lot of the answers came very cookie cutter, just kind of like a summary oriented rather than sort of like an analyst is saying it. So we knew we kind of had to take a step back and reevaluate. So we spent the majority of 2024 building a more so comprehensive application that included player profiles and other sort of features. And yeah, I think what we noticed is the chatbot definitely has lots of room to improve, and just with the way technology is moving right now, we can start to include pretty in-depth stuff like, injury data and weather data and all these different types of advanced stats that we're working on delivering. And I think one of the things that we noticed in particular was chatbots are great. I think it's a great way to disperse knowledge, but in terms of an overall experience, it might not be it. And I think that's something that we're really considering right now, because compared to opening another app like Instagram or TikTok or any other tool, sometimes you can go into those things in discovery mode. You don't really know what you're looking for, but you can go find those. If it's chatbot only, the onus very much becomes on the user to go shoot first. Sometimes it can be great, but that's not always the easiest on their part. So I think we're really looking at a platform that is, the basis of it is the chatbot, but there's going to be interface around it. And the interface, largely, the text on it is generated by our engine, which is the chatbot. So really, we are actually creating an engine that produces context more than anything.
Super interesting. And you make a good point there around the UX around chatbots. It is incumbent upon the user to have some sort of prompt for the chatbot, right? And to your point, in the case of fantasy football, it's like, I don't know necessarily what to ask, but I need a bit of guidance to get started with it. So I haven't really thought of that. That's quite an interesting point though. And I guess a problem for you guys to, think about how do you solve that and extend beyond just the core chatbot functionality. I'm curious, just under the hood of all of this, obviously to surface the insights and, provide meaningful context back to your users requires a pretty deep corpus of data that you guys need to collect and normalize and whatnot. Talk a bit about that side of it. How are you guys sort of solving the data problem, right? I talk to a lot of startups that have great ideas in terms of different ways to interrogate data and ask questions of data, but it requires data to start with, right? And that's not necessarily an easy problem to solve, collecting all of this. How have you guys solved that to enable your chatbot?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And I think there could be a world where we dive a lot deeper into more so the analysis stuff and then the projections and creating predictions. That world is definitely endless because you can have countless data, work it in tons of ways. For us, I would say for now, we're definitely focused more so on the fetching, right? So can you get this certain data point? Can you manipulate it this certain way and then send it back to the user, right? So this is really what we're focused on is delivering knowledge or stats or insights on command for users. And this is, I don't want to say it's not rocket science, but with modern technology and kind of how this stuff is advancing, it's becoming a lot less complicated to do. Just the fact that it doesn't really exist, people can't go out and just Google certain, running back prospects, RAS score, or look at how this player did when this other player was absent and just get a chart and data. And, this stuff is just it's really a simple fetch. I mean, I was listening to when the whole MVP debate with Lamar and Allen was kind of surfacing. I heard Dan Orlovsky give a really good point. It was Allen didn't have a lot of help, but the Bills were still able to lead the league in the most points per drive. And my first question is okay, what did Lamar and the Ravens do on a points per drive basis? And that's actually not Googleable. Even simple stuff like this, we just want to expose users to really whatever they want, however they want to manipulate data. And ultimately, a lot of the initiative from the user's end is to increase their chances, right? Increase their chances of winning or just being right. And the bet that we're making is, okay, if users can get whatever they want, will they at least feel like they've increased their chances of being right, or will they actually be right?
So look, you said you guys sort of formed the idea March 2023, so coming up on 2 years. This most recent NFL season, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, but your first sort of NFL season in market with the product. We're now about a month post Super Bowl here. We've all had a bit of time to just kind of decompress after another exciting season. What did you guys learn, I guess? What were your major takeaways from sort of the first season in market with Rotobot?
I would honestly say the first major takeaway is kind of a point from before where the chatbot, where we're sort of theorizing that it may not be everything. There's got to be stuff around us. That was point number one. Point number two, I would say distribution in today's day and age it's just setting records. I think we're seeing more and more small teams come up and about and really just rocket in the short form content game. And I would say what surprised me is that most of our viewers actually came from live streams. It was really just, we would go live on TikTok and soon we would have about 100 to 200 concurrent viewers, fantasy users blitzing us with questions. And we would do our best to kind of hang in there and field all the questions. And we'd use our own product to kind of educate ourselves as much as we could. But yeah, just the sheer opportunity to be able to just pick up my phone, go live. I could pick up my phone, go live, and we probably have 200 right now.
Should we do it?
We could. And I think it's just such an insane opportunity. And I was recently exposed to, and not to go on a super crazy tangent here, but I was exposed to TikTok Shop recently. And that was a concept that actually blew my mind. So there's a lot of creators out there that have creative followings. They know how to create engaging, captivating videos. And now, if there's a physical product that lists on TikTok Shop and they're selling something, a random creator can go out and go sell that thing. They can go make posts around it, and it doesn't need to necessarily be tied to that company. They're going out and making money on commissions, and they feel like they can because they're able to get lots of impressions, and they don't even need to say hi to anybody at that company. They can just go out and sell it. It's going to be really interesting what happens next.
I think the point you make is a pretty interesting one and definitely consistent with a lot of other conversations I've had recently, which is we all have our ideas and we build out products to solve perceived problems in the market or gaps in the market. But your point around distribution is huge. How do you then get that product or solution to your target audience? And that's actually the hard part. Building a product these days is arguably easier than it's ever been, and probably will continue to get easier with the advancement and proliferation of new tooling and AI and all these wonderful things. But distribution is tricky. And the interesting theme I've observed is a lot of companies now in their DNA, yes, they started and they exist to solve this particular problem with their product, but actually they're almost like media companies first. They know that distribution is such a tough problem. They actually index heavily on becoming media companies and building their organizations as media businesses, or platforms rather, and then using that platform to then cross-promote or cross-sell whatever their product is. And sounds like kind of what you just described there is a small version of that, and really, you're getting that traction with your live streams and using that as the opportunity to engage with your audience, who probably are the target customer profile for the Rotobot product.
100%. And I like how you kind of divided those into two, right? And that's very much how I see things too, where distribution is kind of one pillar and the product is one pillar. Can you create such an amazing product that shatters the earth and, automatically achieves a distribution? Sure, maybe. ChatGPT, some of these big time products that have, realistically infinite ceilings and moats. But outside of that, distribution is crucial for any company. So we see great opportunity there. We want to hit it hard. We're pretty youthful as a team, so we're kind of, all scrolling short form content in general. And I see a big opportunity for even personal brands, people to kind of come up and about and really share their story. I was talking to some people who create content, and they're kind of surprised, even the most basic day in the life videos do very well for them. And even if it's just somebody's job in environmental science or something, they're I don't think anybody cares about this. People are caring, people are watching. And, I think it's really, really cool to see.
Well, as a guy with what I call the world's most niche podcast, I always thought nobody would be interested in this either, yet we somehow have people that listen and watch the Betting Startups pod, so I can relate. And yeah, it's funny, the anecdote is first-time founders focus on product, second-time founders focus on distribution, right? Yeah. It's that's kind of the big learning, which, yeah, in today's world, to your point, you can have the best product in the world, but if there's nobody there to see it, then what's the point? So look, you've had your first full football season in market. As I said, we're kind of in the in-between period right now, it's the spring months where there's still stuff going on, but obviously it's the time for people who focus heavily on NFL to kind of regroup and think about what's coming up for next season. So yeah, we're only in March right now, but how are you guys thinking about next NFL season and sort of what are you focused on between now and then?
There were a lot of positive takeaways from last NFL season that kind of carry us into this one. I guess, first and foremost, we were able to achieve about 10,000 downloads without really any marketing spend. So we definitely want to, crank it up on the distribution side. I mean, it's really just a handful of people from our team, just our founders going live. And we really feel like that can certainly expand. So from the distribution side, we really want to tap into that. More so from the product side, it's very interesting. And this is definitely a topic I'd like to talk about, where if somebody's building sort of like natively AI, they're kind of in a weird middle ground between, okay, here's kind of what we want to build over this much time, versus, okay, let's kind of spend our time finding things and exploring new and better ways to do things, and then doing those, right? So I think, like, realistically and transparently, what we thought would take months to build or years to build can today, in today's age, be achieved in weeks. Back to, what we did in March 2023 when we released that web app, you can make that in a week now. You really can. So when we see this happening, when we're blazing trails, we're realizing that these trails are now being, covered by new tech that's coming out, it puts us in an interesting situation. But just to get like super real here, we see an opportunity to really go into any sport way faster than we thought. Right now, specifically, our team's focused on delivering that sort of stat discovery, advanced stat discovery, which I definitely wanted to talk about a little bit. And coupling that with just refining some of the things that we had, such as the league sync, and making sure that we're really delivering a really nice personalized solution. But yeah, no, we should have stat discovery, league sync, player profiles, all that kind of stuff, and hopefully some betting by the end of the year.
Awesome. Obviously, with the team that you have and the fairly complicated tech that you're building, despite the fact that the tooling is, making a lot of parts of it easier than ever, it takes resources to do all of this. So talking about the funding side of it for a minute here, Aishik, obviously getting your product to market with the team you have takes resources. So can you fill in the gaps around just capitalizing the project to date, and I guess looking forward to reach your next growth milestones? How are you thinking about capitalizing that next phase of growth for you guys?
100%. I think what we see right now is really the capability to do a lot more with less compared to before. So right now we're really just rolling with different angel investors and slowly looking to add on to our list of angel investors. So I think the thought process has definitely come, do we go raise institutional? Do we go raise a bigger round? And, the more we look at it and the more tech advances, we realize that certain grounds can be blazed a lot more effectively, a lot cheaper than before, which definitely, I think, probably will affect the world of VC, if I had to take a guess, to a degree at least. But yeah, that's kind of how we're rolling, and really just want to keep this ship small. I think we've seen a lot of small teams, 10 or less people, 20 or less people, do a lot of damage. So we want to walk onto the scene and see if we can do the same.
I think the point you make is super interesting around just the future of VCs. And look, they're never going to be completely displaced or disrupted. Like, there's always going to be a role for VCs. But I think the types of companies that are candidates for institutional funding from venture capitalists might change, and that bar seems to be increasing, only because, to your point, that whole 0 to 1 phase now can be achieved with real, like, shoestring budgets. You can do a lot of damage with a very small, lean, focused team, whereas even a few years ago, you did need to go out there and raise, 6 figures worth of seed funding to kind of get that initial MVP into market. You don't need that anymore. And really the role of VCs in the future isn't something I'm clear on, but I do definitely see a trend towards certainly the earlier stage ones being somewhat disrupted by the technology, which is a little bit ironic perhaps that, capital allocators are being disrupted by the technology in theory many times that they're funding. So I think the point you make is a really interesting one. But talking about that 0 to 1 phase, which you brought up before, how do you see that 0 to 1 phase changing, even since you guys started 2 years ago, right? You mentioned like that web app that you came to market with could be done in like a week now, and probably this time next year you can do it in like 10 minutes, even while we're sitting here. But like, as somebody, as you said, that like really focuses on that 0 to 1 phase within startups, like how do you see that 0 to 1 phase continuing to evolve as time progresses here?
This is definitely a topic I'm very passionate about, since I've been sort of living in the 0 to 1 waters through most of my career. And, I think right now, if somebody's out there creating something, they're at such a huge advantage compared to the past. And, I think realistically what we're going to see is this theme that ties into Rotobot as well with what we're doing, but really just knowledge democratization, right? Just the trickle down of some expert knowledge coming down and being able to be fielded by people who are just curious, right? There's a lot of jobs out there that require they have jobs because that knowledge is very scarce, right? And I think that we might see that paradigm kind of flip. And I think that it's going to be more advantageous for people who are actually out there probably focusing more on the subjective side of things rather than the more objective side, because I do envision that a lot of the objective tasks will probably have replacements for just automation. And I think like this is both good and bad, because I mean, the bad is that a lot of people have to either change or they lose their jobs. And the good part is really, in my opinion, that the subjective side is kind of the fun part, right? I think people oftentimes dread what they do, and it's largely because it's boring and kind of simple and sort of mundane. But I would say for an entrepreneur, like every day is kind of an episode. You know, every day is it's crazy. Like you're very much in those subjective waters, definitely still dealing with some of the objective stuff. But that's why it's so fulfilling and so fun, because you know you really feel like there's not really a right or wrong answer to a lot of things. It's just kind of the way you go about it. And yeah, I guess just touching on 0 to 1, like you can go 0 to 1 with product, you can go 0 to 1 with distribution, you know, overnight. I think TikTok in particular, they kind of flipped the game on its head, where it doesn't really matter how many followers you have, you can still achieve lots of impressions with your follower base. And it feels like the game is kind of moving away from sort of money and size wins, more to quality and just like authenticness. And I think that that's going to play a big advantage to the hands of the creators.
100%. And like for you and your team, so heavily focused on building AI-driven tech, what's your own personal thesis, to the extent you might have one, on just how entrepreneurship and sort of startup culture changes in the age of AI? And I mean, it's already changing, but as time progresses here, it will only continue to do so. Do you have any sort of theories or theses on just how the game's going to change as a result of all this new tech?
You know, I think that the rise of tech and the ability to achieve XYZ output easier, faster, simpler, even without being technical or something, is going to put people in positions where, I don't want to say you can do whatever you want, but I can say confidently that people are going to now be more equipped to put themselves in positions where they think they thrive and win. You know, I'm just, as an entrepreneur, I'm a big fan of like no elephants climbing trees, right? You know, it's all about your strengths and tapping into your strengths. So I think with this all coming about, people are going to have the opportunity to tap in their strengths. If they have, you know, a certain job that they dread and they feel like they're not advancing or learning, you're going to have opportunity to go out and go make something, or, you know, really help something grow.
Yeah, it seems like the barriers are lower than ever for people that may not otherwise like self-identify as being entrepreneurial in nature. The barriers have basically almost all but been removed now for people to go out there and test their ideas and try things that, again, maybe they wouldn't normally be able to do, which is super exciting, right? Like, I don't like to overuse the term democratization, but it really does truly feel like this is democratizing the playing field and really removing those barriers and creating access for people to enter that world.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, I think a lot of people compare AI to the internet and kind of how big it was when it came up, kind of just stringing them together a little bit. They both follow the lines of this sort of knowledge democratization, right? They're both just built to expose high quality, you know, scarce, previously knowledge to a wider audience. And it's definitely going to have a big impact.
100%, man. Coming back to Rotobot here to take us home, Aishik. We got a crystal ball here in front of us. You're looking into it, you know, in say 5 years' time. Where are things at in that time? And, you know, especially given, like we've talked about, the rapid advancements in some of the technology, like who knows what will be possible in 5 years' time. But to the extent you can pontificate on that question now, what do you sort of see the future holding?
That's a really tough question to answer given all the stuff that's sort of changing now. But, you know, our team is going to just put one foot in front of the other and see what we do. There's lots of different ways we feel like our technology could be applicable. So just specifically in the B2C lens, it's about, you know, educating users to make smarter decisions or bets and all that kind of stuff. We can even see this helping the content creator lens too, because I have a little bit of experience creating content, and I know that there is a pretty annoying process that goes into it in terms of fetching the insight or actually putting together the video. So there could be a way we can accelerate that as well. And we've had a couple discussions with people on teams or leagues, and there could definitely be an opportunity for us to sort of help even scouting departments, right? Just being able to diagnose and sort of find a player, there's certain attributes and kind of how they would fit in the scheme easier, and then just, you know, stats on command and all that kind of stuff. Like it can help so many different things. So it's hard to know exactly. I don't want to sit here and sound unsure of myself, but we definitely want to just be as nimble as possible. We want to act on opportunity. You know, we just want to build a high quality team that's going to build a high quality product.
Love it, love it. A couple rapid fire questions to finish up here today. Quick answers, Oishik. What's the first app you check on your phone in the morning when you get up?
Ooh, this is going to be a weird answer. Sometimes I wake up and I have a question right off the bat and I just ask Grok.
It's not as weird as I thought you might say, but you're in the karaoke lounge. What song are you singing?
Honestly, I'm a fan of a lot of classical music. I'll probably check off any Beatles song there.
Love it. And if you could be somebody else for one day and one day only, who would that be and why?
Probably be Josh Allen, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, he's,
It's a good time to be Josh Allen.
oh yeah, just making $150K a day. Just signed that ginormous contract. So he's definitely my favorite football
Are the
player.
Bills your team?
Yes, of course.
All right. Well, I thought, Massachusetts. I thought you might have a loyalty.
Yeah,
to
no, it was definitely not easy sort of growing up in Mass while the Patriots were, just absolutely storming us and being a Bills fan. But hey, we're a pretty solid team now, so.
100%. Right on, Aishik. Well, look, man, this has been a lot of fun. Really appreciate you swinging by and making some time during a busy week to get with us here at the World Trade Center. So exciting to see the continued progress with Rotobot AI and really rooting for you and your team and wish you guys all the best for the year ahead here.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Jesse. Really do appreciate it.
The Betting Startups podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. 4 out of the top 5 US operators personalize player experiences with Optimove. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/bettingstartups. And if you like what you see, you'll get your first month free.